What it is, people, my name is Batman, and today I want to talk about the heavily diminished standing of the Call of Duty franchise, how its current compromised position is the result of shortcomings it let fester for far too long, and how Sledgehammer Games is using skill-based matchmaking as a part of a broader strategy to essentially redefine Call of Duty in its entirety, and how the franchise will probably continue to change dramatically in the next couple of years in an epic and dramatic struggle to retain its spot as the FPS king. Now, Advanced Warfare is a positive step in the right direction, following the grotesque Frankenstein that was Ghosts, but it would seem this new game is not good enough to fully mend the wounds COD has sustained. Activision has refused to release sales figures, and they have opted to hide the playlist populations in-game. This is the first time either of those things has ever happened, which tells us those sales figures and the playlist populations must be pretty low. They are doing their best to conceal a potentially fatal wound because they know that the COD community eats its wounded. And I think part of Advanced Warfare's inability to return COD to its former glory is the fact that this franchise is suffering from more than just consumer skepticism after Call of Duty Ghosts. There are serious systemic problems, not limited to any single COD, that are actually the inevitable result of COD's original formula for success. Ghosts was the straw that broke the camel's back, but if Call of Duty wants to dominate the new gen as it did the old gen, it's going to have to do a lot more than simply outperform its worst entry, and the developers are aware of this. In fact, I think they were aware of it before Ghosts. Now, to be fair, Advanced Warfare was still the best-selling game of 2014, though I suspect that had a lot more to do with the fact that there was basically no competition in the FPS market this fall than the overwhelming popularity of AW itself. Because, again, we know that the overall sales figures have to be down considerably from its numbers last year, which were, of course, already down considerably from its sales peak originally. Because COD sales have been down in the past. Black Ops 2 sales were down 2 million from MMW3, and Ghosts were down from Black Ops 2 roughly another 2 million sales, so they aren't afraid to show a decline in sales, but their decision not to release the sales figures this time around tells us that it must not have only been a decline, but a steep decline in their sales this year, steep enough that they're worried the sales numbers would erode investor confidence and or contribute to the perception that COD is dying in general. But the fact that its sales were in decline even before Ghosts is further evidence that this game was in decline to begin with, and Ghosts just seriously exacerbated the problem. When we talk about COD's diminished standing today, I think most of us attribute it to Ghosts alone, but that is just inaccurate. The game is and has been suffering from much more than just the Ghosts hangover. COD was a ship with serious leaks even before it hit the iceberg that was Ghosts, and it may recover from that iceberg, but it still has to address those leaks which preceded the iceberg. And so I want to go over what caused those leaks and how the COD developers are planning on patching them up using skill-based matchmaking. COD's biggest problem right now is that its gameplay is painfully simplistic and repetitive. Now, we know the developers recognize this and thus felt compelled to remedy the shortcoming with the exosuit, which, to be fair, does, I think, enhance the Call of Duty experience, but I don't think it fully heals the systemic self-inflicted wounds that remain inherent in the general formula. Primarily, the fact that it is still not fun to play Call of Duty when you, the individual, aren't doing well, and that is precisely why everyone is so upset with skill-based matchmaking, because going even in this game isn't fun. And before I go any further, I just want to say, if you don't like it, don't play it. You're not a game developer. You should be more appreciative of how hard it is to make games. Why don't you go make your own game and play that instead? Because nobody wants to hear you whine. Nah, I'm playing, but wouldn't it suck if I was one of those people? I don't like skill-based matchmaking either, because I recognize that it takes a significant toll on the amount of fun I'm having in-game, because the stark reality of this shit is that Call of Duty is not a fun game unless you are doing well. Now, typically, opponents of skill-based matchmaking argue that their opposition is based on the increased lag this kind of system brings, and there is some truth to this argument, but I don't think it's the primary driver of people's frustration with skill-based matchmaking. Granted, in a game with lag as severe and consistent as Call of Duty's, matchmaking should prioritize connections, period, right? Because if you're in a party of 4 and you all have KDs between 1.5 and 2.0, maybe you're playing late at night, it might be that the only skill-based match you can find for your party is another party of 4 down under in Australia. But the farther away the physical location of those you are connecting with, the harder it's going to be for the servers or your own Xbox to smooth everything out to the most accurate tenths of a second, and considering how inadequate the COD lag comp system is, even for players all located in the same region, skill-based matchmaking basically guarantees much worse lag and a lot more of it. And that was what I bitched about primarily back in Black Ops 2 when they first implemented SBMM, SBMM, but I don't get hung up on that particular aspect anymore, however, simply because, as many of you know, I've accused Call of Duty of intentionally perpetuating the lag because it fosters a system of random, which disproportionately benefits weaker players by allotting them more success based on their lag advantage against stronger players whose lag advantage is redundant because they don't need lag in their favor to succeed in the first place. The lag actually brings a level of equilibrium to the game, and that is of course the exact same primary purpose of skill-based matchmaking in the first place, so in theory, it makes sense that they aren't worried about skill-based matchmaking further degrading the connection of COD matches, because that's not necessarily a bad thing in their eyes. Now, maybe the lag conspiracy is real, but even if it's not, that's not what fascinates me about the controversy surrounding skill-based matchmaking. Let's pretend for a second that the lag was fixed in Call of Duty, that every match ran perfectly on the super powerful dedicated servers Activision can easily afford but never buys, but that it did buy in the context of this hypothetical scenario. People would still hate skill-based matchmaking, including myself, and this is what really intrigues me, because assuming the lag was hypothetically fixed, the primary argument that opponents of SBMM can make is that they want to be paired with players of a much weaker skill level so that they can do very well against said weaker players. They want to be paired with players that they stand a chance of getting high kill streaks on. We want the opportunity to make others suffer for our own enjoyment. And in theory, that argument just feels weak, right? What we are saying is we don't want a fair fight because we can't achieve the level of success we want against players of an equal skill level. That's the real complaint here. You know it and I know it, and it's not one that opponents of the current system make often because we all recognize that it sounds selfish and bratty. It's like a high school senior on the wrestling team begging his coach to sneak him on the JV team so he can win all his matches. But I don't think it necessarily reflects poorly on opponents of skill-based matchmaking so much as it reflects poorly on Call of Duty itself. Because COD is really the only game where your team could be winning and you could be going positive, and even under those circumstances you could fail to find the fun, the enjoyment, the satisfaction in the game. And I think that's what's happening right now with the COD player base at large, and it's driven by skill-based matchmaking because this matchmaking system forces equilibrium and makes it very hard to have a standout game, and that degrades the quality of the game for many people overall because the enjoyment in Call of Duty is derived from what used to be the easily attainable success, the instant gratification. But in order to provide that success and instant gratification to everyone, the gameplay has to be simplistic. And so because the gameplay is simplistic, when that success and instant gratification is taken out of the equation, you're just left with unexciting gameplay. And that is a problem that I think has gotten a lot worse over time for a few reasons. For one kill by itself in Call of Duty has become meaningless. Anytime you accomplish something in a video game, you derive some satisfaction from that accomplishment. The bigger the accomplishment, the more satisfaction you will derive, and it's actually tangible. It's a chemical release in your brain, dopamine primarily, and I've talked about that a lot on this channel. And you all know what I'm talking about. If you toss a grenade and you get a quad kill with it, that is gonna feel much more satisfying than a single kill by itself, right? A triple spray is gonna literally feel more satisfying, exciting than a regular kill. You'll probably even have an instinctive audible reaction like, oh shit. And that's not just conscious, it's biological. Your rewards and incentive circuits in your brain are actually physically responding to the accomplishment the same way they respond to any accomplishment. All gaming essentially breaks down into pure reward and incentive manipulation, and developers know this. That's why they have achievements and trophies, right? It's just these extra incentives you can pursue for a reward that is largely meaningless at the end of the day but brings you some inner excitement. That's why Halo 5 has like 5 different medals popping up on your screen for a single kill. They are betting on the fact that you'll find more satisfaction, a stronger chemical reaction in your brain, more self-validation in those medals, in the more medals that pop up on your screen, as hollow as they may be. So I think a lot of COD's early success was derived from the fact that kills were not only incredibly easy to attain, but each kill also offered a high level of satisfaction because you were defeating another person in combat. But I think that has changed dramatically, particularly for longtime veterans of the series. I think nowadays it's still really easy to get a kill in COD, but the kill by itself provides no satisfaction, no chemical release, because veterans recognize how easy it is to get a kill. The kill itself is instant. The hard part is finding the motherfucker, but with how simplified the maps have become, that's no longer a struggle either. So it's an easy, basically freebie accomplishment, a kill by itself. And then it also means nothing because it barely affects anything, because the respawn time is instant, and especially in AW with exosuits and the small maps, the person you killed can get back to the spot they were just at within 5 seconds usually. And so I think many players, including myself, whether consciously or subconsciously, are instinctively beginning to recognize that the kill by itself means nothing. And that's a problem in a competitive environment where a kill might be the only meaningful thing that you're accomplishing in a match. And on top of that, if you've been playing COD since MW2, you probably have like over 100,000 COD kills. And it's kind of like you build up an immunity to the satisfaction of the kill. I remember my first online COD kill, it was in Derail on MW2, and it was fucking exciting. Every kill was a fat rush. But as time goes on, and you get more and more of these kills, you get used to it. It stops being so exciting each time. And that's true for just about anything, right? From cookies to pornography. A great song, the first time you listen to it, you know, it's life-changing. The 1,000th time you listen to it, yeah, you're kind of over it. More you do things, the less cool they become. More COD kills you get, the less satisfying they become, on top of the fact that they weren't very satisfying to begin with because they're such easy things to obtain, because they have to be easy to obtain for everyone to obtain them, because everyone has to obtain them in order for COD to sell the game to everyone. And so after 5 or 6 CODs, and combined with the gradual awareness players develop of the hollowness of that single kill, the only way for veterans to derive true pleasure from a video game is to do more than just defeat their opponents in combat, is to do more than just kill someone, but to deliver consistent and dramatic massacres, to obliterate and humiliate the enemy completely, to go 50 and 10 with fat kill streaks and killing them from your fucking helicopters in the sky, and a constant flow of enemies rage quitting and then new enemies getting recycled back in just to get shit on. That is the requirement for COD veterans, like myself, like so many of us who are veterans after so many CODs have been released. That is the requirement to find the enjoyment in Call of Duty. However, there is still a significant portion, if not a majority, of the COD fanbase that can derive an acceptable level of satisfaction from a single kill, from just the gameplay itself, and these are the players that skill-based matchmaking is designed to protect. It protects them from the seasoned veterans of the series, veterans whose only joy is to be had in defeating enemies so completely that they don't want to get back on the game. And the reason skill-based matchmaking will stay in Advanced Warfare, and probably all future CODs as well, is that the weaker players who need protection will always outnumber the stronger players, because to be a strong player, you have to be in the minority. If you weren't in the minority, if you were in the majority, you wouldn't be a strong player, you'd be an average player. And so because stronger players will never be in the majority, because that's by definition impossible, they will never have as much spending power as the weaker players, and therefore the weaker players' needs will always take priority. And the other thing to consider is that the vast majority of the player base probably doesn't even know skill-based matchmaking exists. Those of us that spend our time in the online community, in the Reddit and YouTube comment sections, we're actually in a minority, and it's no surprise that our opinions differ widely from the much more casual majority of the player base, because usually those of us who take the time to get so much more immersed in the series via the online community are usually veterans and or stronger players who are taking the hobby, the game itself, much more seriously than the typical gamer. So Sledgehammer is stuck between a rock and a hard place. They face two significant obstacles in making COD an enjoyable experience for everyone who buys it, and a solution for either one of these obstacles only exacerbates the difficulty of the other. If they did let stronger players do as well as they want to, the way they have predominantly in so many past CODs, the players they do very well against have to get beat up on, because for every kill there must be a death. For a player to achieve great success, another player must endure great failure. And those kinds of matches where you just get steamrolled for 10 minutes, where players early on in the match and the massacre often recognize that victory is impossible, and their staying in the game only serves their opponents by giving them someone to beat up on, you know what I'm talking about, those kind of matches that used to be the staple of COD, where one team has a kill streak in the air at all times, where the other team has no realistic chance to even fight back at a certain point. Back in MW2, that was what almost every single match devolved into. So at that point, they either quit, and it's not a rage quit at that point, it's a tactical retreat, and you'd be dumb not to do it, and at that point someone gets thrown into the match to replace them, the person who quit, but they are already starting at a significant disadvantage as the enemy team has an armada of kill streaks already built up, waiting to be deployed, or they have an unbreakable spawn trap already set up, or whatever. One team basically wins the match in the first 2 minutes and spends the last 8 minutes beating up the other players. And so those players either quit or they stick it out and take their fucking beating. But at a certain point, when a player's been on the receiving end of that scenario often enough, they don't get back on the game, because why would they? So the majority of the player base can find satisfaction in a single kill, and the game is simplistic enough, easy enough, so that the majority of the player base can get those kills enough to keep them excited and interested in the game. But nobody ever likes having the shit kicked out of them for 10 minutes straight, even if they enjoy the 1 or 2 kills they do get. And when the shit kickings and the ass beatings become a regular thing, as they do so often, because stronger players have a tendency to seek one another out and form unbreakable super parties, it significantly hurts sales, because again, those players in the majority are the ones getting beat up on and are much less likely to get back on or buy the next game. And the other thing to keep in mind is that with the addition of the exosuits, this COD honestly does have one of the highest skill gaps that COD has ever had. Without skill-based matchmaking, the exosuits would seriously intensify the duration, consistency, and severity of the casual ass beatings. So the devs have sought to remedy this situation by fostering an environment in COD that purges individualism and focuses instead on competition and playing for the win. They promote this style of gameplay using skill-based matchmaking, the clan wars system, which doesn't really involve clan wars at all. It's just a clever ploy to incentivize partying up and playing the objective. And of course the original score streak system this game launched with, which only gave 50 points towards your streak for a kill in any objective game mode. Under this system, the only way to acquire score streaks consistently was to play the OBJ pretty aggressively, but the fact they ultimately caved and doubled the points per kill, which now fully disincentivizes playing the OBJ at all, tells you everything you need to know. People weren't having fun because they weren't able to get kill streaks, because this game isn't fun when you aren't getting kill streaks and doing really well. So now it's really fucking easy to get kill streaks. People are calling in system hacks and chopper gunners in the first 30 seconds of game. Before they'd made this change in policy, the chances of you successfully capturing or scoring enough objective points to earn a meaningful streak were low, because when you play the objective, whether it's jumping on a flag or picking up the satellite and uplink, you're putting a fat target on your back, and at 50 points a kill, it was taking people 20 plus kills just to get an upgraded UAV. It became clear pretty early on that even if you had a great match, obtaining a kill streak in that match was still unrealistic, and so people weren't getting streaks, and thus they weren't having fun, because not only were we not getting those streaks, we were recognizing just how impractical it was to obtain them at all, and thus we gave up on doing well, and then we started to give up on the game itself, because playing this game for its gunplay is like chewing gum for its nutrition. And if they had continued down that road, Advanced Warfare would have suffered, to a lesser extent, from the same flaw that plagued Ghosts. Ghost failed because even when you did do well in that game, it wasn't fun. This was due largely to its uber slow pace that was the result of stupidly large maps and the de facto removal of the UAV from the game. So Advanced Warfare did a 180, a little flippy floppy, and doubled the points per kill, which if you ask me was a tactical error. What they should have done was dramatically increase the amount of objective points you could score, like 50 points for holding the satellite and uplink, dramatically increase the area around the flag for which you get bonus points for a defense or offensive kill, etc, etc. But this is a problem specific to Call of Duty, right? All skill-based matchmaking tries to do is model COD after most other multiplayer games where traditionally the win has always triumphed any other objective. It's always certainly triumphed individual success. And in theory, if they accomplish this, if they accomplish making the win more important than the individual doing well, it would in theory allow them to implement equilibrium without degrading people's experiences. But the problem is, unlike the multiplayer in most other shooters like Halo, like Battlefield, there is not much entertainment to be derived from the actual gameplay, the actual experience of Call of Duty. Without the kill streaks, without high KDs, without any of that stuff. Just the pure act of running around the map and fighting people. If the devs are serious about preserving the future of Call of Duty, they have to address this underlying flaw before they can successfully force this competitive environment on a game that has been defined and won most of its commercial success with its blatant appeal to individualism, general selfishness, and the self-validation of its players' egos through the act of mean-spirited bullying. If you look at a game like Halo, and I want to specifically bring up Halo 3, every match was competitive. Now that's not the case currently in MCC because they still haven't activated ranking for most of the playlists yet. And even when they do, it'll be a different system in a lot of ways. But Halo 3 had perfectly balanced skill-based matchmaking. They balanced it as much as they possibly could. In Halo 3, the only way to earn ranks was to win games. And that rank was all that people cared about. That was what all of the players' ego and pride was poured into. Not stats, just that rank. Now that's never been the case in Call of Duty because you could lose every match you ever play in Call of Duty and perform poorly in said matches and still hit 15th prestige eventually. Success in COD is mostly smoke and mirrors. It's guaranteed. And in Halo, if you quit, you lost ranks, and it discouraged quitting because everyone judged you on your rank. And if you had a bunch of time played and a low rank, everyone knew you were a weak little bitch who quits. So back in Halo, you only got paired with people of a similar rank, which means they had won as many games as you had, but the skill levels always remained very even in matches, because even if it took someone a longer time to reach the same rank because they were losing a lot of matches, that ultimately means they had to have played a lot more games, which comes out to a lot more experience, which makes them a better player and helps deliver equilibrium. And this was important because the skill gap in Halo was very wide. You know, it boils down to nade shots and headshots. Have you ever tried playing against really good Halo players? It fucking sucks. They'll kill you with one grenade from across the map without even seeing you. If the skill levels of the two teams are mismatched enough, it's very easy for the higher skilled team to get a Slayer shutout, because there aren't any free kills, which is of course something they eventually change in Halo 4 with bullet magnetism and a couple of other things. But in a game like COD, if you get a shutout in a TDM, it is only because the other team was AFK. With how instant the deaths are, combined with such low recoil, all the enemy has to do to beat you is see you. And that's the oversimplified gameplay that really helps spread the success around for everyone. So Bungie recognized that it was important to have super strict skill-based matchmaking in Halo 3. And so they put it in, and it wasn't controversial at all. People loved the game, we all had a lot of fun on it, and it did very well and was very popular, even though every match was super competitive. And so it begs the question, why was skill-based matchmaking in Halo so much fun and not at all controversial, whereas the exact opposite is true for Call of Duty? And the answer is simple. It's because Halo's gameplay could stand by itself in a way that COD's cannot. This is something I've talked about in other commentaries plenty, but the differences in the gameplay between Halo and COD, or between a game like Battlefield and COD, reveal the stark differences in their strategies of appealing to their players. In Halo, every map was its own unique puzzle. Whether it's sending up explosive barrels with a perfectly timed grenade up the grav lift to cause a massive explosion at the top of that grav lift where the guy with a sword is camping on the map construct. The force fields on Snowbound, standing at point blank range with your enemy but unable to attack, playing chicken with who walks through the force field first. Taking an entire warthog through a grav launcher and launching the whole fucking thing at the enemy's bomb site to splatter some hapless fuck trying to defuse the bomb your best friend just planted after going on a rampage through the base with a fucking sword on Avalanche. And brute shots and needlers and shotguns and gravity hammers and power drains and bubble shields. Every map, every gun, the vehicles, and the Halo 3 equipment, which is probably one of the most underrated game mechanics of all time, all dramatically changed the gameplay. The depth and diversity of every match. Different, exciting, novel, from each set of 10 minutes to the next. With a bunch of different, interesting game mechanics that to be truly mastered had to be learned. The same is true for Battlefield, but instead of Portal 2 puzzle maps, it's got destructible maps that consistently evolve into a completely different state of affairs by the end of a match than it was at the beginning. An incredible vehicle gameplay. But understanding the map evolution, understanding how to make it work to your advantage, understanding the vehicle gameplay. You know, there's a bigger skill gap in just the Battlefield tank or the Battlefield helicopter than there is in the entire game of Call of Duty. Those are the things that add diversity to the game, but also increase the skill gap. And Call of Duty doesn't have that because it can't have those things, because each of those things adds a new level of complexity, something new that every player has to learn. And the players that have learned how to manipulate these creative in-game machinations will use them to outmaneuver those who haven't learned them. And when every map requires something new to learn, when every gun, when every vehicle, when every piece of equipment requires you to learn new things, it turns the casual masses off, because the casual masses hate learning new things and refuse to do so. And because of that, they get outplayed, and because of that, they cannot be fooled into thinking they are the best at the game, and because of that, they stop playing and get back on Call of Duty. Call of Duty, where the most dynamic map event ever implemented was a rocket taking off over the B flag. Call of Duty, where the biggest difference from weapon to weapon is really only visual, mostly in your head. And that's not to necessarily disparage the casual audience. Maybe they are too busy with other things like school and work, and they don't have time to learn the new things in a game. It's no big secret that a lot of people play these games, and COD especially, to relax. The instant gratification in COD can be relaxing. But the biggest problem COD faces is balancing the needs of that casual audience with the veterans that they are trying to retain. Not only acquiring new players, but keeping the players they already have. We talked about how meaningless and unsatisfying a kill has become in COD, because it inevitably has to be meaningless for it to be so easily attainable for so many people of so many different skill levels. That was not the case back in Halo 3. Kind of was in Halo 4 because Halo 4 tried to copy COD, but in Halo 3, every kill was a meaningful accomplishment in and of itself. And because of that, going 15 and 10 in Halo is a lot of fun, but largely pathetic and unrewarding in COD, right? Like, think about that for a second. You go 15 and 10 in Halo, that's a fun game. And most likely it was let's say it was a very competitive match, which it probably was, game of Slayer where the entire team are neck and neck the whole match, you probably had a lot of fun that match, and when it was over, you were happy with your score. Very few people are going to find an immense, satisfying, exciting, rewarding experience going 15-10 in Call of Duty, right? And it's just the result of our acknowledgement, whether conscious or unconscious, of the skill and the risk that goes into the kill. And because of the amount of that skill and risk, how accomplished we feel in obtaining said kill. In Halo, every gunfight can go either way. It looks like Bob is going to lose the gunfight, his shields are down, but oh, he sticks Frank with a plasma grenade and Frank goes down. They go at it again. This time Bob gets the first few shots off, Frank's shields are at half, he starts backpedaling, he knows he can't win with his gun, but he chucks a grenade at the fucking ceiling and gets the perfect bounce and lands it right under Bob's feet, and Bob's shields are done, and boom, pistol whip headshot, Bob gets popped like a zip, boom son. Bob comes at Frank with a gravity hammer, he smacks Frank, but failing to get the direct impact, Frank is thrown into the air, but while in the air, charges up a plasma pistol bolt and EMPs Bob's shields. Now all he has to do is land another headshot, but he misses, and then Bob hits him with the gravity hammer slam again, and Frank's limp body flies through the air, a mobile monument to his failure. And even the easy kills still require to stay on target for a full second or two, even when they're not looking at you, and there's the fear that this motherfucker will escape you in that time if you can't stay on target, and then the motherfucker will turn on you and kill you, and then he will run around the corner and you will chase him, and when you find him, he'll be sitting there with his sword out. Without rain, we cannot appreciate the sun. Without pain, there is no fun. It is the fear of failure that makes success so special. It is the fear and failure that makes Halo, that makes gaming, that makes life special. We talk about dopamine, the chemical release in your brain. I know we all recognize that a quad spray feels more satisfying, more invigorating than a single kill. It is literal, it is tangible in your fucking brain. You get a rush, maybe even some fucking adrenaline when you get that tactical nuke back on MW2. You ever had an adrenaline rush from a game? That's what the fuck I'm talking about. That adrenaline is driven by fear. That adrenaline would not exist without the fear of failure. I would estimate that because of the fear, because of the recognition that failure is possible and success is earned, not distributed like Valentine's in a classroom where the rule is that every kid has to get every other kid a card and some chocolate, every kill in Halo, the emotional reaction within you is measurably equivalent to at least 2 kills in Call of Duty. Going 15-15 in Halo is, in my eyes, the equivalent in terms of satisfaction and excitement as going 30-15 in Call of Duty. But because of skill-based matchmaking, achieving 30-15 in COD has become exponentially more difficult, while the developers have failed to recognize the underlying failure of the game, which is that it is oversimplified smoke and mirrors that the player base at large has begun to recognize as disingenuous and illegitimate. The fear of failure isn't there in COD anymore. There is only the expectation of overwhelming success, and when that is removed, there is nothing. COD's original success was its ability to trick its players into thinking the fear was real, that failure was possible, that they had to work for the kills. But now after 6 years, we realize that's just not true. It's bullshit. The kills are free. It's Valentine's Day in the classroom. It's 20 million participation trophies that we mistook for real gold when in fact it was just shitty brass that rubs off on your fingers when you touch it. And the devs know that we know. So they say, well, let's make it a more competitive experience. Let's make them work for something this time. But what's the incentive to win? Your match bonus so you can level up a little faster and hit 15th prestige, even though we all recognize at this point that prestiges mean nothing and represent nothing except how much time a player has spent on the game? The prestiging system itself is the ultimate symbol of this game's hollow accomplishments. Remember when people used to really care about reaching the highest prestige in Call of Duty? When it was a symbol of honor? But we have all sort of realized what a pathetic joke it really is. It's just foosball with a bunch of fucktards. And meanwhile, there's real sports being played outside by real athletes who win real trophies. And I don't mean real sports as in real life. I mean the real games. They tried to copy COD. Halo 4 and Battlefield Hardline tried to dumb down bullet magnetism, customizable classes, kill streaks in Halo. Battlefield took out its tanks and put in second chance. You can pull the med packs and ammo out of your teammates' ass because teamwork and communication is a lost cause, obviously. They imported the infection that is the COD formula, not realizing that the COD formula is dead. That COD's limited success the last 2 years, maybe even the last 5 years, has been based off of nothing but name recognition, milking the accomplishment of a development team that was cut out in the ultimate act of greed right after they struck gold. They imported that cancer, and they learned the hard way and suffered the just consequences of slapping your original fanbase in the fucking face by making a play for stupid and easy because there might be more money there, but it turns out there wasn't because Halo 4 got fucking rejected, and the proof of that is how Halo 5 has shunned every change Halo 4 made, and Hardline had to limp its release date back to March because its pre-orders were so low because nobody wanted to touch its annualized copy and paste dumbed down format, and in their pathetic attempt at winning over the worst kinds of COD players, they risked and wounded their relationships with the hardcore fans of each of their respective franchises. I hope they are not fucking stupid enough to make that same mistake again. But regardless of what they do, this year, COD faces an existential crisis 6 years in the making, and the way it all plays out will have significant ramifications for not only COD, but the rest of the industry for years to come, because COD has been copied and COD is being watched by a bunch of eager developers and publishers who want a piece of that pie. Presently, Sledgehammer is stuck. Do they make the game very fun for some people while simultaneously rendering it super frustrating for others? Or using skill-based matchmaking, do they force everyone into a state of equilibrium in which nobody has very much fun, period? It is a lose-lose proposition. It is a failed formula that must be abandoned altogether for the sake of COD's future, for the sake of the genre's future. And the sooner the developers realize this, the sooner COD can be a better game. The sooner all shooters can give up this massive erection they have for filthy casual gameplay and instead focus on actually making better games that push us to be better players and better people, as all art should. And by enlightening the community of these things, we are better positioned to apply pressure to the developers. And another thing that I think more developers and players need to realize is that a huge part of COD's financial success on the old generation consoles over the last 10 years, perhaps even a majority of that success in that time, wasn't due to its dumbed down communist style gameplay, but is owed to 60 frames per second. It was the only 60 frames per second game on the old gen consoles. But that is no longer the case. Battlefield and Halo, both of which I would argue have superior gameplay, are now running at 60 frames per second as well, and their superior gameplay didn't matter as much in the past because the cold hard truth is that for most people, going from 60 frames per second to 30 frames per second makes 30 frames per second seem broken. It essentially broke the competition regardless of how strong their gameplay was. But now I think when people get on BF4 or Halo at 60 frames per second, they are starting to see COD for what it really is, an empty, soulless shell of a game, an Oreo without the creamy filling. And it's only natural that we're going to start demanding a better game, and until they can meet that demand, this franchise is going to continue to crumble. And if they want to provide that better game, they're going to have to do more than stick with what's safe. I actually think the whole Exo Zombies thing is a bad thing. A perfect example of COD developers running to something popular in their past in a desperate attempt to keep people playing their game. It obviously wasn't their original intention, or it would have been kept with the base game. It's a desperate flail that makes it clear that exosuits themselves haven't done enough to maintain this franchise's financial status quo, and if they want to try to recapture the success, let them. The fools, too ignorant to realize it is the very success that has inevitably led them to this undignified juncture. If they want to continue to survive and thrive much the way they have in the past, they're gonna have to find the next big thing. Because we've already been living in the past for 6 years, because what are games doing right now that they couldn't have done in 2009, excluding the extra 60 frames per second buffs on some of these games? Why do you think COD is in decline? Is COD as fun for you as it used to be? How can COD redeem itself in your eyes? How can COD make itself fun again? Please be sure to rate the video, and may the force be with you always. This is Batman, signing out.
Warbird decloak sequence active.